I've held a 68-year-old heart in my hands that looked like it belonged to someone 45. Smooth, elastic, arteries clean and flexible. I've also held a 65-year-old heart that looked like it was 90. Stiff, calcified, arteries clogged with decades of damage. Same age range, completely different bodies. The difference wasn't genetics, it wasn't medication, it wasn't luck, it was food, eaten consistently, over decades, one unremarkable meal at a time. That contrast, right there on the operating table, changed how I eat. I'm Dr. Olivia Kesson. I'm a cardiovascular surgeon, and what I eat after 60 looks very different from what I was eating at 40. Not because I'm on some restrictive protocol, but because after 60, the body changes in very specific ways, and the foods that address those changes are not the ones most people are choosing. Muscle breaks down faster than it rebuilds. The gut absorbs nutrients less efficiently. The thyroid slows. Sleep becomes harder to sustain. Inflammation accumulates faster than the body can clear it. And the foods that matter most for those specific changes are not the famous ones, not the ones on every magazine cover, but quieter, stranger, more specific choices that the research keeps pointing toward. These are the 15 I eat almost every single week. And stay with me through the whole list, because at the end, I'm going to reveal one food that is being sold directly to people over 60 right now as one of the healthiest breakfasts in America, with a heart logo on the box and a cholesterol-lowering claim on the front. That is quietly doing the opposite. Let's go. Every list has to start somewhere. I want to start here because the research behind this food, specifically in elderly populations, is the most striking single finding I've come across in nutrition science. Lentils. And legumes broadly. Chickpeas, black beans, white beans, split peas. A study called The Food Habits in Later Life Project tracked 785 people aged 70 and over across 5 countries, Japan, Sweden, Greece, and Australia, for 7 years. Researchers measured every food group they could track. Only one came back with consistent, statistically significant results across all 5 populations. Not vegetables, not fruit, not fish. Legumes. Every additional 20 grams of legumes eaten per day, that's 2 tablespoons, was associated with a 7 to 8% reduction in risk of death. All-cause mortality, 2 tablespoons. A 2023 meta-analysis of over 1.1 million people confirmed the same direction. The mechanisms are multiple. Legumes blunt the post-meal blood sugar spike that becomes more dangerous after 60. They feed the gut bacteria that regulate systemic inflammation, and they provide plant protein that preserves muscle without the saturated fat load that comes with meat. What I do is keep canned lentils and chickpeas in the pantry at all times. I add them to soups, salads, and sometimes just eat them warm with olive oil and salt, 3 or 4 times a week. No recipe required. The longevity link, the single food group that outperformed everything else in the largest study of elderly populations ever conducted. 2 tablespoons a day. I eat rolled oats almost every morning. Not instant, not flavored packets. And the distinction matters more than most people realize, which is exactly why the flavored packet version is the worst food I'll reveal at the end. Real oats, rolled or steel cut, contain a specific soluble fiber called beta-glucan. The cholesterol-lowering evidence behind oat beta-glucan is among the most solid in nutritional science. In 1997, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved a health claim for oat beta-glucan, one of the very few foods ever given that status. The claim, consuming at least 3 grams of beta-glucan per day reduces cardiovascular disease risk. A meta-analysis of 28 randomized, controlled trials confirmed. Oat beta-glucan reduces LDL cholesterol by around 5 to 7% on average. The mechanism: beta-glucan forms a thick gel in the digestive system. That gel binds to cholesterol-rich bile acids and carries them out of the body before they can be reabsorbed. The liver then has to pull cholesterol from the bloodstream to make new bile acids. LDL goes down. After 60, when arterial deposits have had decades to build and cholesterol management becomes increasingly consequential. A consistent LDL reduction from breakfast alone is a meaningful number over years. What I do is 5-minute rolled oats, not steel cut, which takes 30 minutes. I add chia seeds and a handful of whatever berries I have. No sugar. The longevity link, FDA-backed LDL reduction from a 5-minute breakfast that costs pennies per serving. This is the one that makes people pause. But hear me out, because chicken liver is arguably the most nutrient-dense food that exists per calorie on this planet, and it addresses the single most common and underdiagnosed nutritional deficiency in Americans over 60. I eat it once a week, usually as a simple pâté on whole grain toast. Vitamin B12 deficiency affects an estimated 10 to 15% of people over 60, according to published research in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. The reason is not that people stop eating B12-containing foods. The reason is that the stomach produces less acid as we age, and stomach acid is what frees B12 from the proteins in food so the body can absorb it. Without adequate acid, the B12 passes through largely unused. The symptoms of B12 deficiency overlap almost perfectly with what most seniors are told is just aging: fatigue, cognitive slowing, memory lapses, tingling in the hands and feet, difficulty with balance. Many people are told this is inevitable. In some of those people, it is B12 deficiency, which is correctable. One 3.5-ounce serving of chicken liver provides over 16 micrograms of B12, more than 6 times the recommended daily intake, in highly bioavailable form. The same serving delivers preformed vitamin A, absorbed at 70 to 90% efficiency. Hemi-iron, the most bioavailable form of iron, absorbed at 15 to 35% compared to 2 to 5% for plant iron. Choline, critical for memory and cognitive function, which 90% of Americans don't get enough of. And CoQ10, a compound the mitochondria need for energy production that the body's own synthesis of declines after age 40. No multivitamin delivers that profile in a bioavailable food-based form. The honest caution: liver is high in preformed vitamin A. Once a week is the right frequency for most adults. If you take a vitamin A supplement, talk to your doctor before adding liver regularly. The longevity link, correcting the nutrient deficiencies most common and most consequential after 60. B12, hemi-iron, choline, CoQ10, from one food, once a week. What I do is cook chicken livers gently in a pan with onion and a little butter, blend them smooth, and keep the result in the fridge. A tablespoon on toast. Easy, inexpensive, and nutritionally without equal. I drink about 4 ounces of unsweetened Montmorency Tart cherry juice most evenings, and I started doing this because of 2 clinical findings that I think every adult over 60 should know about, neither of which involve antioxidants in a vague way. The first is sleep. A randomized controlled trial published in the American Journal of Therapeutics found that adults over 50 who drank Tart cherry juice twice daily for 2 weeks slept an average of 84 additional minutes per night compared to the control group, with significantly better sleep efficiency. Not from a pharmaceutical, from a juice. The mechanism: Tart cherries contain naturally occurring melatonin, a small amount, but more importantly, they contain compounds that inhibit an enzyme called IDO, which breaks down tryptophan in the body. Tryptophan is the precursor to serotonin, which converts to melatonin. By preserving tryptophan, Tart cherry juice increases the brain's own melatonin production from the inside. A different and more physiologically natural effect than supplementing melatonin directly. The second finding is for gout. Gout affects an estimated 9 million Americans, and the rate rises steeply after 60. It is one of the most painful and underestimated conditions in older adults. A systematic review of 6 published studies found that Tart cherry juice consistently reduced serum uric acid, the compound that crystallizes in joints during gout attacks, and was associated with fewer reported gout flares in patients who consumed it regularly. A study in arthritis and rheumatism following over 600 gout patients found that cherry consumption was associated with a 35% lower risk of gout attacks compared to periods without it. The longevity link, 84 extra minutes of sleep per night, which cascades into cardiovascular health, cognitive function, and immune resilience, plus meaningful joint protection from 4 ounces of juice before bed. What I look for specifically: 100% Montmorency Tart cherry juice, no added sugar. The sweetened versions contain fructose, which can raise uric acid, directly undoing the benefit. I eat exactly 1 Brazil nut every day, not a handful. 1 Brazil nut contains approximately 68 to 90 micrograms of selenium, which is roughly 125 to 160% of the recommended daily intake of 55 micrograms for most adults. Most people have never thought about selenium, but after 60, it becomes critical for 2 specific reasons. First, thyroid function. Your thyroid uses selenium to convert the inactive thyroid hormone, T4, into its active form, T3, the version your cells can actually use. Without adequate selenium, that conversion is impaired. Result: a thyroid that appears normal on standard blood tests, but isn't functioning at full capacity. And the symptoms of an underperforming thyroid: fatigue, unexplained weight gain, feeling cold when others are comfortable, cognitive fog, dry skin, overlap almost perfectly with what most Americans over 60 are told is simply aging. Second, antioxidant defense. Selenium builds a class of proteins called selenoproteins that control oxidative stress, the cellular damage that accumulates with age and drives chronic disease. A meta-analysis of 7 randomized controlled trials confirmed that Brazil nuts significantly increase both plasma selenium levels and glutathione peroxidase activity, one of the body's most important antioxidant enzymes. Now here is the critical safety point. Selenium toxicity is real. Chronic excessive intake causes neurological damage, hair loss, and nail abnormalities. The tolerable upper limit is 400 micrograms per day. 1 Brazil nut reaches your daily requirement. 4 or 5 begins approaching the upper limit. A handful is too many. 1 nut. Every day. The most efficient selenium delivery in the food supply at a dose that is safe, predictable, and takes 5 seconds. The longevity link: thyroid hormone conversion, antioxidant defense, 2 of the most consequential systems after 60, from 1 nut that costs about a nickel. I eat 2 kiwi fruits about an hour before bed most nights. That sounds oddly specific, but the research behind it is specific enough to justify the specificity. A randomized controlled study published in the Asia-Pacific Journal of Clinical Nutrition followed adults with self-reported poor sleep quality. Those who ate 2 kiwi fruits 1 hour before bed every night for 4 weeks fell asleep significantly faster, slept longer, and had substantially better sleep quality scores compared to the control group. A separate study in elite athletes found similar results over 4 weeks, significantly better total sleep time and sleep efficiency from 2 kiwis before bed. The mechanism is unusual. Kiwi contains serotonin at a concentration of approximately 5.8 micrograms per gram, confirmed in published research. Serotonin is a precursor to melatonin. Kiwi also provides folate and vitamin B6, which are required cofactors for serotonin synthesis in the brain. The full-spectrum nutritional profile of kiwi appears to support the brain's own sleep regulation system from multiple angles simultaneously, which may explain why it outperforms isolated melatonin supplements in some comparisons. Beyond sleep, one kiwi provides more vitamin C than an orange, exceeding the daily recommended intake for most adults in a single fruit. Vitamin C is the cofactor required for collagen synthesis. After 60, collagen production declines. Research published in the Journal of Cellular Physiology found that kiwi polysaccharides can double collagen synthesis rates compared to normal conditions. Kiwi also provides vitamin K for bone health and lutein and zeaxanthin for eye and brain protection. The longevity link: natural sleep improvement supported by 2 controlled studies, collagen support and immune protection, from a fruit that costs less than $1 per serving and requires no preparation beyond peeling. I crumble dried nori sheets over eggs, soups, and rice several times a week. And I want to talk about why nori is on this list specifically, because it addresses a nutritional gap that is remarkably common in women over 60 and almost never discussed in mainstream health coverage. Iodine deficiency. Your thyroid requires iodine to produce its hormones. The recommended daily intake for adults is 150 micrograms. And while iodine used to be reliably provided through iodized table salt, many health-conscious Americans have shifted to sea salt, Himalayan salt, or reduced sodium intake overall, all of which provide little to no iodine. Nori, the dried red seaweed used in sushi rolls, is one of the most accessible and consistent dietary sources of iodine available in American grocery stores. 2 to 4 sheets provide a meaningful iodine contribution without approaching excess. Nori also contains something extraordinary for a plant food: biologically active vitamin B12. Research has found that 4 to 8 grams of nori provides approximately 100% of the daily B12 requirement in a form that the human body can absorb and use. This makes nori one of the very few plant-based foods to reliably contain usable B12, relevant for the many older adults who have reduced animal protein consumption. The important safety distinction: not all seaweed is equal. Brown seaweeds, particularly kelp and kombu, contain extremely high and variable iodine concentrations that can provoke thyroid dysfunction if eaten regularly. Nori is a red seaweed with moderate, more consistent iodine levels and a much safer profile for regular use. If you have a diagnosed thyroid condition or take levothyroxine, check with your doctor before adding seaweed regularly to your diet. The longevity link: iodine for thyroid hormone production, B12 for nerve health and energy, 2 of the nutrients most commonly deficient in adults over 60, from a food most Americans have only encountered wrapped around rice. What I do is keep a packet of plain, unseasoned nori sheets in the pantry and crumble them over food the same way other people use a seasoning. No cooking. No preparation. I have a mug of homemade bone broth most mornings, sometimes alongside breakfast, sometimes just on its own. I want to be honest about where the evidence is strong and where it is still developing, because bone broth has been heavily oversold online, and I don't want to contribute to that. What is established: bone broth is one of the richest dietary sources of glycine, an amino acid that plays 3 specific roles that become increasingly relevant after 60. First, joints. Glycine is a primary structural component of collagen, which makes up the cartilage in joints. As collagen production declines with age, dietary glycine becomes relevant for supporting the body's cartilage maintenance. This is not the same as reversing arthritis, but it is supporting a system that is under increasing strain. Second, sleep. Multiple controlled trials have found that glycine supplementation at 3 grams before bed significantly improves sleep quality and reduces daytime fatigue. The proposed mechanism involves glycine's effect on body core temperature regulation during sleep onset. A lower core temperature is associated with faster sleep initiation. Bone broth provides glycine in amounts that align with what these studies used. Third, gut lining. The epithelial cells that line the intestinal wall use glycine as a primary fuel source. As gut barrier integrity naturally declines with age, glycine availability supports the maintenance of that barrier. This matters because a compromised gut lining allows bacterial products into the bloodstream, driving the systemic inflammation that underlies most age-related chronic diseases. The longevity link: glycine supporting joint structure, sleep onset, and gut barrier integrity. Three systems that specifically and predictably decline after 60. What I do? Simmer chicken carcasses for 6 to 8 hours with a splash of apple cider vinegar, which draws minerals from the bone into the broth. Strain. Jar. Refrigerate. 1 mug in the morning. It takes 1 hour of active time on a Sunday to make a week's supply. I eat edamame 2 or 3 times a week. Frozen edamame steamed in 5 minutes. Edamame, immature soybeans, is one of the very few plant foods that is a complete protein, meaning it contains all 9 essential amino acids in proportions the human body can use. 1 cup of cooked edamame provides approximately 17 grams of protein and 8 grams of fiber. After 60, a phenomenon called anabolic resistance means the body becomes progressively less efficient at converting dietary protein into muscle tissue. Research consistently shows that older adults need not just more total protein per day, but more protein per individual meal, at least 25 to 30 grams per meal, to overcome this resistance and actually trigger muscle protein synthesis. Edamame at 17 grams gets you most of the way to that threshold from a plant food with essentially no saturated fat. Reason edamame belongs specifically on a senior longevity list goes beyond protein. Edamame contains isoflavones, plant compounds with a mild estrogen-like effect in the body. After menopause, the sharp decline in estrogen accelerates bone loss and increases cardiovascular risk. Research on Japanese women who consume significantly more soy than Western women and have lower rates of menopausal symptoms, better bone density outcomes, and lower cardiovascular disease rates consistently points to isoflavone intake as a contributing factor. For most women without a history of hormone-sensitive cancers, 2 to 3 servings of soy per week is consistent with current research and international dietary guidelines. For men, edamame's protein and fiber make it one of the most useful plant proteins available. At normal food consumption levels, isoflavones in soy do not affect testosterone, according to current research consensus. The longevity link: complete plant protein at the doses older adults need, plus isoflavone compounds addressing the hormonal dimension of aging from a 5-minute frozen food. I add 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed to my oats every morning. The word ground is not optional. Whole flax seeds pass through the digestive system almost entirely intact. The hard outer hull protects the interior from digestion, meaning the beneficial compounds inside largely exit unused. Ground flaxseed, milled, with the hull broken, makes those compounds bioavailable. What's inside is worth accessing. Flaxseed is the single richest dietary source of lignans, plant compounds that the gut converts into compounds with antioxidant activity and a weak estrogen-like effect. Research consistently shows that lignan intake is associated with reduced breast cancer risk in postmenopausal women, reduced prostate cancer risk in men, and improvements in cardiovascular risk markers, including LDL cholesterol. A meta-analysis of controlled trials found that whole flaxseed supplementation significantly reduced both total cholesterol and LDL through mechanisms different from oat beta-glucan, meaning the two together in the same breakfast produce additive rather than redundant effects. Flaxseed is also the richest plant source of ALA omega-3 fatty acids. 1 tablespoon provides approximately 2.3 grams. which the body can partially convert to the longer chain forms that reduce inflammation in the heart and brain. And its soluble fiber content contributes to blood sugar stabilization at every meal. The longevity link, lignans with cancer protective and cardiovascular associations, plant omega-3s, and cholesterol reduction, from 1 tablespoon that disappears into oatmeal without changing the taste. Buy it pre-ground or grind it yourself. Store it in the refrigerator. Ground flaxseed oxidizes quickly at room temperature and loses its benefit. I cook with canned crushed tomatoes almost every week in sauces, soups, eggs, stews, anything warm. And I want to explain why the canned version specifically belongs on this list rather than fresh tomatoes, because this is genuinely counterintuitive, and most people have never heard it. Tomatoes contain lycopene, the pigment that makes them red. Lycopene is one of the most studied dietary antioxidants, with consistent research associations with lower rates of cardiovascular disease and certain cancers. Here's what most people don't know. In fresh, raw tomatoes, lycopene is locked inside intact cell walls in a chemical form called all-trans lycopene. The human gut absorbs this form poorly. Heat breaks down the cell walls and converts lycopene to the cis form, which is dramatically more bioavailable. A small amount of dietary fat enhances absorption further. Studies have found that bioavailable lycopene is 2 to 8 times higher from cooked tomato products compared to the same amount of fresh tomatoes eaten raw. The research on lycopene and prostate cancer, among the strongest dietary cancer associations in the literature, is specifically built on cooked tomato consumption, not fresh salads. And lycopene inhibits LDL oxidation, the specific step in the arterial disease process where LDL particles become inflammatory inside the arterial wall. Slowing that process slows the buildup of arterial plaque. A can of crushed tomatoes costs around $1. It lasts in the pantry for years, and it delivers more usable lycopene than a salad full of fresh tomatoes. The longevity link, cardiovascular and cancer protective benefits through a form of lycopene your body can actually absorb from one of the cheapest, most versatile foods in the grocery store. I eat canned oysters once or twice a month, on crackers with a squeeze of lemon. And I put them this high on the list because they solve a specific problem that almost nothing else in the food supply addresses at anywhere near the same concentration. Zinc deficiency. 6 medium oysters contain approximately 32 milligrams of zinc, over 200% of the daily recommended intake. Most zinc-containing foods, beef, chicken, legumes, deliver 1 to 3 milligrams per serving. You cannot realistically match oysters from any other single food source. After 60, zinc deficiency produces consequences in 3 areas that directly affect quality of life. First, immune function. Zinc is required for the development and normal function of T lymphocytes, the immune cells that identify and destroy abnormal cells and pathogens. Mild zinc deficiency is more common in older adults than most people realize, and it directly compromises immune surveillance at exactly the age when that surveillance matters most. Second, taste and smell. Many seniors notice a gradual decline in their ability to taste and smell food, which leads to reduced appetite, nutritional decline, and loss of the pleasure of eating. Zinc deficiency is one of the documented dietary causes of taste and smell dysfunction in older adults. Third, wound healing. Zinc is required for every stage of tissue repair. After surgery, injury, or even routine skin breakdown, zinc availability directly affects healing speed and quality. The longevity link, immune resilience, preserved sensory function, and tissue repair, 3 systems directly affected by zinc status, from the most zinc-concentrated food in the American food supply. Canned oysters cost $2 to $3. They have a mild, briny flavor. Most people who are hesitant find them perfectly approachable on a cracker with lemon and hot sauce. I roast a batch of sweet potatoes once or twice a week, eaten as a side dish, mashed with olive oil, or cold in salads. Sweet potato earns its position near the top of this list because it addresses two specific problems that become more pressing after 60 through mechanisms genuinely different from anything else on this list. The first is potassium. One medium-baked sweet potato provides around 540 milligrams of potassium. Most Americans eat far more sodium than potassium. That imbalance is one of the primary dietary drivers of hypertension in older adults, and hypertension is the leading modifiable risk factor for heart attack and stroke. Potassium counteracts the blood pressure effect of sodium directly. It helps the kidneys excrete excess sodium, and it relaxes the walls of blood vessels. The AHA and NIH both identify the potassium-sodium ratio as a key dietary lever for blood pressure control. Most seniors are not short on sodium. Almost all of them are short on potassium. The second is beta-carotene. Sweet potato gets its orange color from beta-carotene, which the body converts to vitamin A as needed, with the conversion regulated automatically, preventing the toxicity risk that comes with preformed vitamin A. Vitamin A supports immune function, eye, health, and skin integrity, the physical barrier that keeps pathogens out of the body. After 60, skin thins and the immune response behind it slows. Beta-carotene supports both sides of that equation. And when sweet potato is cooked and then cooled, a portion of its starch converts to resistant starch, a fiber that feeds beneficial bacteria in the large intestine and produces a significantly lower glycemic response than hot sweet potato. Cold sweet potato in a salad is both a gut food and a blood sugar food simultaneously. The longevity link: potassium for blood pressure, beta-carotene for immune and eye support, resistant starch for gut bacteria. 3 separate mechanisms from one food. I take 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in a large glass of water before my main meal of the day. And I want to be precise about what the research actually shows here, because this is an area where online claims have significantly outrun the evidence. What randomized, controlled trials demonstrate: a study published in Diabetes Care found that consuming apple cider vinegar before bed reduced fasting blood glucose by 4 to 6% in people with type 2 diabetes the following morning. Multiple controlled studies on healthy adults found that vinegar consumed before a carbohydrate-containing meal reduced the post-meal blood glucose peak by 20 to 35% compared to meals without vinegar. The mechanism is the most well-understood part. Acetic acid, the active compound in all vinegars, inhibits specific enzymes that break down complex carbohydrates and starches in the small intestine. Slower starch digestion means slower glucose release into the bloodstream. Smaller glucose peak, smaller insulin response. After 60, when insulin sensitivity naturally declines and the metabolic consequences of blood sugar dysregulation compound over years, this blunting effect at every major meal becomes increasingly meaningful. What I don't claim: apple cider vinegar is not a diabetes treatment. It does not replace medication. It does not produce dramatic weight loss. What it does: consistently and measurably blunts the post-meal blood sugar spike through a well-established mechanism, at no cost and essentially no risk when used correctly. The essential safety note: undiluted apple cider vinegar is acidic enough to erode tooth enamel and irritate the esophagus. Always dilute 1 tablespoon in a full glass of water. Drink it before eating rather than during or after, and avoid brushing your teeth for at least 30 minutes afterward. The longevity link: post-meal blood sugar stability and improved insulin sensitivity, addressing the metabolic shift that occurs in virtually every adult after 60, from a tablespoon of vinegar in water. I eat real sourdough bread most days, And I'm putting this at number 1 because it sets up the worst food reveal perfectly. Understanding what makes real sourdough genuinely different is the context you need to understand why the thing being sold to you as a healthy heart breakfast is doing the opposite. Real sourdough, made through long fermentation with wild yeast and lactic acid bacteria over 12 to 24 hours, changes the bread in 3 documented ways. First, glycemic response. The fermentation process partially breaks down the starch structure of the grain and reduces available carbohydrate. Multiple studies have found that real sourdough produces a significantly lower blood glucose response than the same amount of conventional white or whole wheat bread. For someone over 60 managing blood sugar at every meal, bread that doesn't spike glucose is bread that stops working against you. Second, mineral bioavailability. Grains contain phytic acid, a compound that binds to minerals and blocks their absorption. In conventional bread, phytic acid limits how much iron, zinc, and magnesium you absorb from the grain. Fermentation degrades a significant portion of phytic acid, increasing the bioavailability of those minerals in the final loaf. Third, fermentation byproducts. The lactic acid bacteria in real sourdough produce compounds during fermentation that have documented beneficial effects on gut health distinct from other fermented foods, including supporting the diversity of gut bacteria that regulate inflammation throughout the body. The honest caveat most important here: most sourdough sold in supermarkets is not real sourdough. It is conventional bread with added acidifiers, vinegar, or citric acid that mimic the sour flavor without any fermentation. The label says sourdough. The product has none of the fermentation benefits. Real sourdough requires real long fermentation. If you can find it at a local bakery that actually ferments it for 12 to 24 hours, it is worth paying more for. Or make it yourself. The longevity link: lower blood glucose response than any other bread, better mineral, absorption, and fermentation benefits. Bread that helps rather than harms. Now, the food I promised you. The one with the heart logo on the box, the cholesterol-lowering claim on the front, sold specifically to people over 60. That is doing the opposite of what it says. Flavored instant oatmeal packets, Quaker, every major brand. The ones marketed with heart-healthy, whole grain, fiber-rich, and antioxidant blend on the packaging. Here is the problem. Most flavored instant oatmeal packets contain between 12 and 16 grams of added sugar per single serving. That is more added sugar than many candy bars. But there's a second problem that's even more specific and even more relevant. The FDA-approved cholesterol-lowering claim for oats is based on beta-glucan, the specific soluble fiber that forms a gel and removes cholesterol from the bloodstream. That gel-forming property depends on beta-glucan maintaining a high molecular weight, which is what allows it to form a viscous solution in the gut. The instant processing that makes instant oatmeal cook in 1 minute, the pre-cooking, the cutting into microscopic pieces, reduces the molecular weight of the beta-glucan. Published research confirms that high molecular weight beta-glucan is significantly more effective at reducing cholesterol than low molecular weight beta-glucan. So instant oatmeal delivers reduced beta-glucan effectiveness alongside 12 to 16 grams of added sugar. You are paying a premium. You are reading the health claims. You are trusting the label. And you are getting a reduced version of the benefit it promises, wrapped in enough added sugar to cause the exact blood sugar spike that the oats are supposed to help prevent. Buy rolled oats. 5 minutes. Add your own fruit if you want sweetness. Half the price. The full benefit. To bring this together. Longevity isn't about perfection. It's not about the latest supplement. It's not about eliminating entire food groups or following a complicated protocol. It's about 15 boring, specific, repeatable choices that compound over years. Lentils, the only food that outperformed everything else in a 7-year study of elderly populations. Real oats, FDA-backed, LDL reduction at breakfast. Chicken liver, more B12 than 6 times your daily requirement, plus iron, choline, and CoQ10 in one weekly serving. Tart cherry juice, 84 extra minutes of sleep and 35% fewer gout attacks. One Brazil nut, your daily selenium requirement in one nut that takes 5 seconds. Kiwi before bed, 2 controlled studies showing faster sleep onset and longer sleep duration. Nori, iodine and plant-based B12 from a seasoning most Americans have never used at home. Bone broth, glycine for joints, sleep onset, and gut lining. Edamame, complete plant protein with the isoflavones relevant to aging specifically. Ground flaxseed, the richest lignan source in food. Cancer protective associations, plant omega-3s. Canned tomatoes, 2 to 8 times more bioavailable lycopene than raw. Oysters, the most zinc-dense food in the American food supply, addressing immunity, taste, and healing. Sweet potato, potassium for blood pressure, beta-carotene for immune support, resistant starch for gut bacteria. Apple cider vinegar, 20 to 35% reduction in post-meal blood glucose spike. Real sourdough, lower glycemic response, better mineral absorption, fermentation benefits. And the one to avoid, flavored instant oatmeal. Heart logo on the box. Less beta-glucan efficacy than real oats. More added sugar than you expect. Doing the opposite of what the packaging says. None of the 15 foods are expensive. None are exotic. All of them are available in any grocery store. What they require is choosing them intentionally, week after week, rather than defaulting to whatever is loudest on the packaging. That consistency, unremarkable meal, by unremarkable meal, is what builds the 68-year-old heart that looks 45. Please share this with someone in your life who is over 60 and still making food choices based on what a package claims. Subscribe to this channel. I bring you research-backed health information for adults over 55, clearly explained. Leave a comment below. Which food surprised you most? And which one are you adding this week? I read everyone. Take care of that body. I'm Dr. Olivia Kesson.